Music is music. um,
Music is music, yeah.
Welcome to Let's Be Frank, episode 21. I'm very proud of us for getting this far. um, Today we wanted to talk about something more lighthearted. I actually can't remember what our last episode was, but it was heavy. I remember I remember that we said next week let's talk about something more chilled. Um,
Yeah.
and so we decided that music was that thing that is maybe a bit more chilled. But then actually when we were talking about some of the things we could talk about with music, we were talking about struggle songs and um yeah, so maybe not that chilled, but let's see. So what does music mean to you, Herman? I know you're a big music man and I can see your guitars in the background.
Yes, well, I think music is such a universal thing. Um, it is the one thing that can easily unite people. Um, and music throughout history, I didn't really go and check up, kind of what the origin of music would be. Siri piping up there. Um, so I haven't checked up on the origin of music, but certainly as far back in history, I think as we can go, music has always been a part of culture,
Yeah.
um, and there are thousands, literally thousands of different musical instruments around the world. Um, and then, kind of we've got what is considered to be the Western music, consists of 12 notes. That to me is kind of what's so amazing about it. This is that all the Western music that we listen to consists of 12 notes and combinations thereof.
I didn't even know that. And I did piano for a few years.
So yeah, you should know this.
I know I should.
Uh,
It was a long
A
time
to
ago.
G with a A
Okay.
to G with a few sharps and flats sprinkled in between, except for what is it, B and E? I think don't have a sharp. But anyway, so um, what stands out for me um, about that fact is that there's a lot of structure within what you're allowed to do.
Yeah.
But once you kind of adhere to these basic rules, then it allows for all sorts of beautiful chaos to happen within those boundaries.
Yeah.
And I
Interesting.
think that that's really what makes it so universal and so appealing to
Yeah.
such a large number of people.
Well, that's like you say,
To
there's 12 notes and then all the combinations of that. I mean, to think about how much there is out there and in the different genres and styles, it's crazy to think that it all comes down to 12.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if you just pick one single genre and go, wow, this body of work that is out there, all kind of sits within those 12 notes and combinations they are. Um, so, but also if you think about it, that I don't know, in the course of I don't even know when this was first established, but it's definitely more than 300 years ago, because some of the great composers did their best work around about 300 years ago. I think Mozart was early 1700s, if I remember correctly. So we've had this kind of same structure that applies for such a long time,
Yeah.
and it hasn't changed, and yet it allows us to, I don't know, create new stuff every single day.
Wow.
So that fascinates me about
Yeah.
music.
I suppose there are the odd occasion where wasn't Ed Sheeran recently sued for copying someone else's music, and there's
Yeah,
always things that pop up where um, people will say that someone has stolen something that they put together.
yes.
But if there is only so many combinations at some point, it's not unusual to think that there might be some repetition.
Oh no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to really go down to very specifics to get to that point where people can claim that they have um, copied your
Yeah.
song. And there's been a few famous cases, I suppose, where people. I'm trying to remember one of the bigger ones or one of the more famous ones prior to the Ed Sheeran one, and it just escapes me now. But it does come up from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, an interesting fact is that "Happy Birthday," the song "Happy Birthday to You,"
Yeah.
was at some point copyrighted by, I think it was Disney. Anyway, it took a long struggle and a long fight to kind of get to the point where they said, no, 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 this is public domain. But for quite a while, they made quite a lot of money out of that
I can imagine.
by, by assuming that. I hope I'm not getting it wrong that it was Disney, but
Yeah.
it was either Disney or one of the other Hollywood studios
Okay.
that claimed that had the copyright of that for some time.
Imagine they made money every
Um,
time someone was washing their hands during COVID. Because wasn't that one of the things? Sing happy birthday three
correct,
times or
correct.
whatever it was
Yes.
while you're washing your hands.
Yeah. Um, but also, if you think about the the influences of some of the more famous pieces of music, um, generations later, or generations after it was first created or composed, um, so I remember that "Smoke on the Water" is the exact same notes, just in a different order as the start of a. No, I'm not sure, but it is either a Beethoven or Mozart piece of music. Da 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 da
Mm-hmm.
da da. "Smoke on the
Yeah.
Water" is, and and so there are many others which kind of, well, these are either specific notes or series of notes, um, and how they were adopted
Yeah.
right into very current music. Um, it makes sense that a lot of modern artists are actually heavily influenced by previous generations, and even as back as the great composers of
Yeah.
the 1700s and 1800s.
300 plus years ago, yeah. I can think of a few. I can't remember the exact song, but I think Sting samples one of the great composers in one of his songs. And I mean, I've seen Mozart come up in some anime that I've watched, and they always come back in some form. Um,
Yeah,
Classical
there was
music. I know
another.
you've been researching it a bit, and you've got some thoughts on classical music.
Well, I've just started listening to a bit more classical music because it's always rock or metal for me. Um, but I started listening to classical music a little bit more um, because I don't know that much about it, and I'm not that familiar with the different artists, etc.
Mm-hmm.
There are only a few which I would, you know, kind of recognize and be able to name. And then there are slightly distinctive styles where I would, okay, cool, this sounds like more like a Vivaldi um, than a Tchaikovsky or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm just kind of broadening my horizons. And what I'm finding is that there's even current classical music. Um, so people are still writing classical
Yes.
music, of course,
Yeah.
and and there's some beautiful pieces that were just written in the last few years, which is amazing. Um, and then mixing that in with a little bit of the really old stuff, the stuff that we've all heard at some point in time, and maybe some of it we've heard in either movies or TV shows,
Yeah.
etc. But you won't recognize necessarily because you only hear these snippets and so on.
Yeah.
But to listen to the actual full version of it. Um, and the other thing that I've also kind of just gotten a better understanding of is the different um, types of classical music. And what I mean by that, I don't even know if that's the correct term. But you know, the classical music is always like symphony number so and so by this in this key by this artist,
Yeah.
and concerto and sonata, and so I just read up a little bit about what is a sonata and what is a concerto versus
Yeah.
what is a symphony and so on. So I don't know. I don't get anything out of that other than being able to, oh, okay, cool. I now understand why you call that a sonata.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is something that I quite enjoy. I
Yeah.
was recently I recently played golf by myself, and while I was playing golf, I was listening to classical music.
Did it help?
Um, it 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 actually well, I do that quite often. I listen
Yeah.
to music while I play golf, especially if I'm by myself. Um, and it doesn't really matter what genre it is that I'm listening to. It does. I enjoy it. I can't really say that it helps or it hurts, but it it is a good use of my time, I think, while I'm out there and doing something. And it's definitely not distracting.
Yeah.
Um, but I was wondering whether there are other people playing golf and also listening to classical music at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't think that there are many of us out there.
It might help
Um,
with I know you get a lot of angry golfers who break their clubs. Maybe it would
yeah, yeah.
keep them measured.
Well, fortunately, I've never been one of those. Never broken
Yeah.
anything or felt the need to break anything. But the other interesting thing. So you mentioned anime, and I mentioned movies and so on. Just think how boring movies would
Yeah.
be if there's no music.
Yes, I think there've been some clips on Instagram, like in these pivotal scenes. Like there was one in the House of the Dragon where they take out the music and you just hear like some muttering of the people and some like clearing of the throat, and it just completely takes away the drama and the intrigue of the scene, just not having the music.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something that we really pay attention to until somebody points that out.
Yeah,
You think,
yeah,
wow, that would be really silly if it didn't have the accompanying music.
yeah. And then you think of some of the greats, the Hans Zimmers and the John Williams. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Who is the other really famous um, person? I think he did a collab with or did some work with Pink Floyd. Well, there was one that definitely did some work with Pink Floyd. Um, and I wonder if there wasn't somebody who also did a Metallica album.
Uh, yeah, I think so. So I have tickets to the Rock Orchestra next month,
Oh wow.
and they do all of like the rock and metal songs, but it's a full like philharmonic orchestra. playing
Mm.
through a whole bunch. They've got like System of a Down, Metallica, and ACDC, and all these things. So really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, it's on the same day as a quarterfinal for the World Cup. So, but
Oh,
yeah,
my word. Yeah.
I'm not sure who those composers are that you're thinking of.
Yeah, maybe the name will come to me,
Yeah,
but I really enjoy those live performances
yeah,
where a metal band kind of has the full philharmonic orchestra.
yes,
It really brings a richness to the music. And one of my favorites, um, like I mentioned, the Metallica
yeah,
album, which they recorded a live album that they recorded with an orchestra, and then there's also an alter bridge
okay,
album that was recorded with an orchestra. And then if you listen to the original versions of the song and then you listen to
yeah.
that recording with that philharmonic orchestra, um, it's amazing
Yes, I
what it
also have
can
a
add.
favorite. Bring Me the
Yes.
Horizon live at the Royal Albert Hall. It's my favorite DVD. And if I'm ever feeling a little bit down, I put that on, and it just
Okay.
lifts my spirits. And it's a metal band with like a screamer, and they have the full philharmonic orchestra behind them, and it just changes the way the songs feel and sound, and it almost feels like it changes the meaning behind them in a way.
Yeah.
Just by changing the composition of the music. I don't know. It's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's obviously something that we haven't touched on is the different moods that music can create out of those 12 notes and how you combine
Yeah.
them is how some of them have a very upbeat um, and happy kind of emotion associated, and some of them have a sense of melancholy um, associated with them, and how the use of them. We don't necessarily listen to a piece of music and think, oh, okay, cool, you used X, Y, and Z chord,
Yeah.
and therefore it creates that mood. Um, and, and that is really what's so great about it for me is we don't have to know all these technicalities to experience it in the way that it was intended.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that I also find interesting is the effect that the economy or economic events have on music. So when you go through a boom or a bust period, whether you go through um, a recession or a period of prosperity, how that changes the music um, from both ends, both from the music that people write
Yeah.
and also what the general public or listeners prefer to hear. In other words,
Yeah.
what becomes popular. So, so you can think about, I don't know, rock and roll. It's kind of like I suppose, in a more happy time.
Yeah.
Then you think to metal or more the heavier stuff that
Yeah.
was in a not so happy time that started,
Yeah. Punk,
kind of got
very
its footing. Then you get
anti-establishment.
absolutely, and then
Yeah.
you get punk and grunge
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of things that really was like um, a creative outlet for people to kind of vent their frustration
Yeah.
about whatever it was. And you think about how some of those things became popular so quickly and established a whole genre. And then it lasted for a number of years, and then there was something else that needed to be said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's really interesting how that kind of follows certain patterns. So I'm wondering, it feels like we are ready for kind of that next revolution or evolution in
Yeah.
music genre to happen. Because there's some of these commentators or experts that I kind of follow their work on YouTube and so on. And the question is asked is what is wrong with music today? Well, you know, why is the stuff that top the charts is so terrible? Um, which there's no other way to kind of describe it. It is terrible,
Yeah.
a lot of it. And you think about, well, okay, maybe that has to do with kind of the times that we live in. Maybe it has to do with kind of the events that we've been through.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so these are all things and ideas that about music that fascinate me. Well, one of the genres that we didn't talk about is the blues. You know, the
Yeah.
blues almost had an, a, an equally big effect on popular music as the classics.
Yeah.
So, I maintain that. Imagine if just going back to the classics again. Imagine guys like Mozart and Beethoven and Bach had access to electric guitars and amps
Yeah.
and pedals and all these sorts of things. They would have made fantastic heavy metal,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Um, but then you kind of go to, what is it, 100, 150 years later, you get the blues, kind of the blues, if I remember correctly, around about 1860 or somewhere around there, was what's deemed as the origin of the blues.
Okay.
And then it was kind of like adopted later on. Then we have a whole generation of these really famous artists that became real big rock stars that were heavily influenced by the blues. And even in the grunge, I mean, Kurt Cobain or Nirvana really enjoyed some of the early blues.
Okay.
A guy by the name of Leadbelly.
I've
Um,
heard of that.
yeah, so in one of the more famous MTV Unplugged
Hmm.
concerts, the Nirvana one, towards the end of it, they actually talks about it.
Okay.
But Leadbelly's estate tried to sell him Leadbelly's guitar for $500,000 or whatever. But I know both, the band as a whole were really big fans, and some of the great songs, which I don't think a lot of people realize, were covers from earlier music. There's uh, oh my word, there's actually a Lead Belly song on there. Where Will You Sleep Tonight? I'm not sure about the exact title of it, but it's a phenomenal song. And then you listen to their version of it, and then you go and listen to the original Lead Belly version of
Yeah.
it. And so you can go through some of the older rock stuff and also kind of go and listen back to it. So blues have also had a phenomenal um, impact on modern music.
Hmm.
Um, and then I just want to mention that I may have sounded like I have no respect for modern music, etc., and what's on the charts. Um, but I also have to mention that there are phenomenal new artists out there making phenomenal music.
Hmm.
And people that, again, within the same 12 notes and within the same boundaries that you have to operate in, start doing really interesting new stuff. Somebody like Polyphia, I mean, Tim Henson, and
Yeah.
the absolute genius in terms of playing the guitar and the compositions that they put together and so on. So I'm not for 1 minute saying
Yeah.
it's hopeless, you know.
Well, they're not on the charts, are they? So you are still talking
They're not
about
on the
kind of
charts.
the chart toppers.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing is, a lot of the people that we kind of think to as big names and big artists, they didn't necessarily just decided that they were going to form a band and was top of the charts the next week or the next month, you know.
Yeah.
We it was Maynard James Keenan from Tool said that it took people 7 years to get Tool.
Yeah.
And that was okay with him. He didn't make music. So whatever they did, uh, it's quite interesting to see that these Tool still has a phenomenal following
Yeah.
now 20, 20, 25 years
Huge
later,
following. Yeah.
etc. Huge following, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, people like Rodriguez as well, who was famous internationally without knowing he was famous for a very long time.
Yes,
South Africans
what
loved
a
him.
story. Yes, what a story, eh?
Yeah.
Recently passed away, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, music is such a huge topic. Maybe I think we've mentioned this. Maybe next time we need to be a bit more focused on which part of music we want to talk about. I also went to, just because you
Yeah.
mentioned it earlier, I went to the London Film and TV Orchestra concert where they were playing kind of all of the big songs. So the Jaws theme tune, the Harry
Yeah.
Potter, the Game of Thrones, Star Wars, all of these things. And there's just something so powerful about hearing those things played by an orchestra and the way that it just moves you kind of like deep inside. I was just curious, do you know of any of kind of the dopamine effects of music, or uh, I was just wondering if there must be some research done into how music triggers our dopamine receptors, or
I definitely think so. I can't point you to a specific study or so, but definitely from an experience. I mean, which is why, as you say, I think there's that thing about sitting there and experiencing it live
mm-hmm.
is obviously, something that kind of adds to that. But then there's also, as you mentioned earlier, if I'm feeling a little bit down, then I
Yeah.
know what I'm going to listen to,
Or
If I
watch.
want something to cheer me up,
Yeah.
yeah.
The Sound of Music.
Um,
I've always
so,
loved a musical, so The Sound of Music is also a cheer me up one for me.
yeah, so I definitely think that there is a link
Yeah.
um, right there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something specific. For me, I feel like I always get something out of listening to something that I'm not necessarily that familiar with. I'm not looking necessarily for an instant pick me up or, this will get me out of my mood or into a mood or whatever. But the experience of listening to something that I haven't listened to before.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't say that it's just uh, it's not necessarily always something that I enjoy and will listen to again.
Mm-hmm.
But just the experience of listening to a completely different genre of music, um, and often I'll not force, but I'll make a point of it to listen to something more than once
Okay.
before I kind of discard it.
Yeah.
And I give it a little bit of an opportunity to grow on you. But yeah, I agree with you. I think in terms of the dopamine and the different chemicals, etc., that are released in the body, music definitely influences that in a
Yeah.
big way.
Yeah. Well, and something that you just mentioned about making a point to listen to something more than once, there's also a bunch of people on YouTube who review songs. I know you
Yes.
watch a few of them, but it is another way of kind of understanding more than just on surface level, kind of what that song is doing and what the
Yes.
composer has done, and kind of looking at some of the more technical things that maybe we would miss on a first listen, that makes them more interesting or entertaining, or even just makes the
I
story
also,
behind them interesting.
yes,
Yeah.
but I also love how people listen to different genres of music, things that they wouldn't normally listen to, and those first time reactions and so
Yeah.
on. So, so, it's, so I find it really interesting to listen to or to watch some of those um, reaction videos. I
Yeah.
don't think all of them are authentic, but by and large, I think that there's a whole um, new set of fans being created
Yeah.
through that, you know, which is also really nice. Expose people to music that they wouldn't otherwise listen to, and broaden their horizons a little bit, and so on. Yeah, it's all fascinating stuff.
Okay, so this is a very general chat about music. I think next time we're gonna have to talk about maybe songs that you're writing, Herman.
No, 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 no. I haven't done that in a long, long time, and I'm completely not in my near future to attempt that.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, but we didn't get to, and maybe that's for another chat. Is to talk about kind of like music that favorite bands, favorite songs,
Yeah.
and why.
Well, this is so. I was thinking we'll definitely talk about music again. My introduction to music was quite interesting because I've got an older brother and sister, and then an uncle who was a big muso. And he used to, I'll never forget, my parents went away to visit my brother and sister who were overseas, and I was left with my uncle and aunt. And he had this new gadget. It was like a very early stage iPod type of thing. It was like the first discless portable music player,
Yeah,
and he had loaded all of his albums onto it, and it was like his prized possession. And I remember I was a 12-year-old, and he told me to be very careful with it, but I could listen to whatever I wanted. And I remember going through all of his music and being really like deeply influenced by some of the things that he had on there. And he's always been our family DJ Christmas time, and he's the one who has all of the music and goes to all the concerts. So yeah, I think definitely it would be interesting to talk about the music that's influenced us and that we listened to growing
mm,
up and that we listen to now. Because we've mentioned a couple of bands, Polyphia, Bring Me the Horizon, Nirvana, but we haven't really gotten into that. So
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
a chat for another day.
Definitely,
Cool.
definitely. I'll have to work on my short list of kind of favorites there. Yeah.
It's tough for me too because I also have quite a varied interest in music.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah. Excellent. That'll be a
cool.
good chat.
Thank you, Herman.
Thanks, Ali.
Chat soon.